What if you didn't fully own your mind? Your mind, the home of your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, the place where you live. But what if someone else could live there too? Another voice, a presence. Would it be a disorder, a delusion, or something else entirely? Because some people are doing this on purpose. They are creating entities inside their own minds, not just fantasies, not hallucinations. Can this be real or even dangerous? They call them Tulpas.
We are really not one person.
126 different personalities. What does that mean?
It is an entity. It rises by itself. It is autonomous.
It was a nightmare crime. 2 12-year-old girls stabbed their friend 19 times.
Actually, we're all multiple personalities.
What exactly is a Tulpa? Imagine you're creating a being, not from flesh and blood, but entirely inside your mind. Not just a fantasy character or an imagination, but something built to think, to feel, to act on its own. That's a Tulpa, a consciously created second person brought into existence through visualization and meditation, now living rent-free inside your head. People who have Tulpas call themselves Tulpamancers, or just hosts. And they say these beings feel shockingly real. Friendships form, relationships, even arguments. And though Tulpas exist only in the mind, they behave like autonomous entities. Some people even claim that their Tulpa is capable of controlling their own body, which is also known as fronting.
What the fuck is going on here?
What once sounded like a one-way ticket to a psychiatric ward is now a subject of serious research. It started on 4chan and Reddit, places where people share experiences on how they created their Tulpas, often inspired by anime, video game characters, or pop culture.
This is a practice that arose out of the tumultuous depths of the internet. Unlike many of the meditation techniques circulating the common sphere today, this one developed on 4chan and Reddit instead of in Tibet or India.
And that is true, at least in its modern form, but the word Tulpa has older roots. In 1929, explorer Alexandra David Neal wrote about creating a phantom through deep meditation. Not a fantasy or imagination, she claimed it acted on its own, and that others could see it too.
I see you.
She connected her experience to the Tibetan term Tulpa, which means something like manifestation. In Buddhism, this refers to sacred appearances, like a presence that's guiding you towards enlightenment. But David Neal reimagined it. She merged Eastern concepts with Western esoteric ideas, and in that fusion a new idea was born. Not a divine spiritual guide, but a mental being with its own will. And that shift from sacred practice to autonomous beings made its way into the internet culture.
I went on one of these things called a website. They got all of the inside stuff.
But why do people do this? There are many reasons. Loneliness, curiosity, or let's just say very specific motives. There are many reasons why someone creates a Tulpa. Some use their Tulpa to practice new languages. Others rely on them during anxiety attacks or just have someone there to talk to. Some even go further and build entire new worlds called wonderlands inside their head, like your own private Minecraft server where you and your Tulpa can join. So how do you actually create a Tulpa? Well, it's simple. Imagine an apple. Can you see it? Great, that means you have the key. Your imagination. Your Tulpa can be anything. A person, a creature, an anime character or a flying toaster, whatever you want. You give it a form, a voice, a personality, and then you talk to it. That is called forcing. It's not about control, it's about spending focused time with your Tulpa, actively or passively. You imagine them being there. At first, their voice might sound like yours. That's normal. Eventually, after some weeks or even months, it should start to talk back on its own.
all here.
Tulpas require time and commitment, but there's a catch. They don't just fade away. Some people even report they feel guilty after removing one. Even Alexandra David Neal said her tulpa has changed. He became thinner, his face turned sly, and she lost control. In the end, she had to unmake him. So be careful what you bring into your mind. It might just want to stay. Are tulpas dangerous? That's the first question most people ask, and many immediately think of multiple personality disorder. But there's a clear difference. Tulpas are consciously created. The host stays in control. In contrast, a multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder, develops from extreme trauma. Those identities aren't created on purpose. They can be disconnected from each other. Sometimes one personality doesn't even remember what the other one did. The host's core identity is fractured, split into multiple personalities. Not like a tulpa that is created consciously inside your head. And yes, some tulpamancers report that their tulpa can front. It means temporarily taking control of the body. But the host stays in control. It's only a disorder when it starts to be distressing, and for most tulpamancers, it isn't. In fact, early studies suggest that tulpamancers have more self-awareness and less loneliness, because they feel a sense of support. But not all stories are that harmless. In 2014, 2 girls attacked a classmate, allegedly under the influence of Slenderman.
They were playing a version of hide and seek, and then one girl said to the other, go for it. Stab, stab, stab.
Some say Slenderman is kind of a collective tulpa, a thought form created by mass belief.
Wait, what?
But let's be honest, there's no credible evidence that tulpas can be perceived externally or that Slenderman is anything more than a creepypasta. So that case, it was most likely a psychological disorder and has nothing to do with tulpas. So are tulpas dangerous now? Tulpamancy hasn't been well researched yet, but my take, tulpas are only as dangerous as the person who creates them. No one becomes a threat just by creating a tulpa. In fact, they might even help you.
Could you help us?
In modern psychotherapy, there's a concept called inner parts. Your mind isn't just one thing. It's made of many parts, shaped by memories, emotions, and experiences.
We all have these, what I call parts, other systems call subpersonalities, ego states, things like that, and that it's the natural state of the mind to be that way.
And some of these parts get buried through trauma or social conditioning. They get forgotten, but they are still active, just beneath the surface. An example. As a kid, you were told to stop crying because someone took your snacks.
Let me guess. Someone stole your sweet roll.
So you did. You shut it down. And years later, when someone shows emotion, you freeze. You feel uncomfortable. Not because you're cold, but because a part of you still believes feelings aren't safe. And that part is still there. It's trying to protect you. Inner work means finding that part and finally saying, it's okay now, I'm listening. And sometimes just listening isn't enough. In trauma therapy, there are techniques that go a step further. You don't just meet your inner parts, you create someone to help them. Like a healer, a guardian, a safe space inside your own mind. Someone who shows up when things get too heavy. It's called working with inner helpers. And it's used to stabilize, support and protect the vulnerable parts of the self. Tulpa techniques work similar, but with one key difference. Tulpas are meant to become autonomous. They're not meant to be just tools.
In order for this all to work, you need to completely let me in.
They start thinking and speaking for themselves, but they're still made from the same raw material. Imagination, role models, emotions. When you create a tulpa of confidence, you're not inventing confidence from nothing. You're pulling it from the times you were strong, from people who inspired you. So maybe a tulpa is just a concentrated reflection of everything that is already inside you. What if Tulpamancy isn't just about creating a companion, but also about rediscovering parts of yourself you've forgotten? In Tibetan Buddhism, tulpas were tools on the path to enlightenment. But what if that simply means using your imagination to light up the shadowy corners of your own psyche, bringing buried parts of yourself back into the light, to enlighten yourself? Like going into the basement of your mind and finding what you left behind. And maybe the Tulpa is a personification of those things you left there. Even if you create it consciously, it might grow in ways you didn't expect it, depending on the ground you planted it.
Because you see, the unconscious is real. It is an entity. It rises by itself. It's incredible.
Even Carl Gustav Jung, a famous psychologist, worked with inner figures, especially Luhrmann, a winged old man who appeared in his visions. He spoke to him. He called him an inner voice of deeper knowledge, a personal encounter with the autonomous unconsciousness. And this idea goes beyond psychology. Maybe Tulpas, especially collective ones, could explain ancient myths, demons, spirits, and even gods. Archetypes formed from human longing, fear, and memory. After all, beavers all over the world build the same kind of dams, and humans everywhere tell the same kind of stories. Maybe imagining beings is simply part of our human nature. And maybe Tulpamancy is more than just creating imaginary companions. Maybe it reveals something deeper inside our own psyche. But hey, what do I know? These are just my thoughts. I think we need more research on all this, but it's really a fascinating topic. What do you think? Are Tulpas just psychological parts manifested into a being? Or is there something more behind this? Could collective Tulpamancy explain gods or spirits? Even religion itself? And would you ever create a Tulpa, or maybe you already have one? I would love to hear about it in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.